Hello and welcome to I Can't Believe It's Not the Mouse, the podcast all about animation not made by the mouse. I'm your host, Octaviano, and today I'm joined by a guest. You've seen him here before. It's Arnell Regis.
aka 35. Anyway, that was a weird ass intro for my sake, but yes, I am here once again with Octaviano, and we are going to discuss about another animation outside of that rodent.
Yeah. Uh,
All right, go ahead.
so we talked about the Lego movie years ago. It's only a matter of time. It was only a matter of time that we'd talk about the sequel. And I figured, what better time than right before a new Lego movie drops? Before we get started, I just want to say if you're listening to this on YouTube, go ahead and give it a like, subscribe to the channel, feel free to comment, and ring the bell for notifications. Also, if you're on Spotify or just any other podcast site, follow this show on those platforms. For those of you who are completely unaware, which I completely understand, this thing was announced out of the blue, and I've seen the trailer maybe two or three times at most in the theater. And I go pretty regularly to theaters to watch movies. But there's a new Pharrell biopic called Brick by Brick or Piece by Piece, was it?
I think that's what it was called. Yeah, I think it was piece by piece.
Um, but yeah, it's basically if you look up Lego Pharrell biopic, you'll probably get it right away. That's most of what I've told people to look up anyways whenever it comes to talking about this. So I figured, all right, let's talk about the Lego Movie 2. We could have talked about Lego Batman, but I figured that I want to kind of save to have more of like a group of people like DC nerds and stuff, just because there's a lot of DC fan service in that.
A
And
lot.
even though I'm like one of, I don't know, maybe the only person who actually enjoyed the Lego Ninjago movie, no one gives a shit about the Lego Ninjago movie.
I haven't even gotten a chance to watch it, to be honest. I only wanted to watch Batman and then the first two Lego movies. I wasn't really aware about the
The
Ninjago
Ninjago.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, that one didn't do so well. For what it's worth, I don't think it's bad. I think it's cute. I do think that the advertising kind of spoiled the big joke. I mean, it happens early on in the movie still, but there's a whole thing where it's like, okay, the town gets attacked by a kaiju, and it's literally just a regular cat just walking around destroying the Lego sets. It's funny, but it's definitely, in my opinion, the weakest of the Lego movies because it's trying to latch on to that kind of style that these movies have, but without the references to like the known properties, which wouldn't be so bad, but it's like it's still trying to have that vibe. Um, I don't know. I still enjoyed it, but it's definitely one where it's like, yeah, no one gives a shit about this movie. We just jump into the Lego Movie 2. Realistically, you don't need to have watched the other two movies to enjoy this. The only thing that I will say is that Batman kind of factors into it just because you do get the same Alfred from the Lego Batman movie, and they do kind of acknowledge like, yeah, he had his own adventure, but that's pretty much the extent of what you need from the Lego Batman movie. So yeah, we got the Lego Movie 2, the second part, which is as of this moment the last installment for this series.
So to
Um
speak, yeah.
there was plans for Warner Bros to do more, but this movie tanked so hard in the box office.
Yeah.
I'm kind of surprised by it, but I do get to an extent, which will probably be you'll probably figure out why when we talk about it. Um, I'll say this much before, and then I'll let you speak on this right now. But I'll say this much for having watched it again recently. I still think it's a good movie, at least a good enough movie. Uh, I will say that there is aspects of it that I really appreciate, but there is a lot of really messy stuff in there that I'm like, yeah, I kind of get where some of the reputation that this movie has gotten, where it gets it from. But, you know, I'll leave it at that for now.
Well, where are we gonna get started with that movie? Because there's so much to discuss. There's so much. And for it to be a sequel, since
Yeah,
it literally starts off at the end of the first movie.
which kind of caught me off guard. I'm not gonna lie. I remember when I was thinking about like, okay, they're gonna do a sequel. I mean, granted, I guess this movie does take place years later because they do have like that time jump where it's like 5 years later. But I thought we would just get on that, not like, like, okay, let's make that ending to that first movie a cliffhanger now.
Hmm. Yeah, like I guess what they were doing is that since with that cliffhanger and then bringing it back up to prominence in the second movie, it's like okay, well, like people can now be left off to where it ended, basically, so to speak, and we get to see where what's what is basically the genesis of how the next conflict begins for this movie. And I mean, I get it, sibling rivalry.
Yeah,
That's the whole that's part of the theme going on with this plot is like it starts up as like a whole sibling rivalry between how like the sister and the brother like play with Legos. And then it just all coalesces as to how the gang of Legos try and see where they can go through in this time as their worlds are like going back and forth, like becoming I don't know what would you call it, clashing. There you go, where each of their worlds are clashing with each other up to like a point where we're in this freaking Mad Max
yeah,
background.
yeah. It's a Mad Max style Lego verse.
Yeah, that really just like, are you serious? And then they played the same type of opening from the first movie, just in a more apocalyptic setting at this point. And it's
Yeah,
like, what the now you have this completely oblivious Emmett just going around the area trying to say everything's okay when it's not. Everyone's all brooding, everyone's all homeless, everyone's all like straight up just ready to attack in this freaking apocalyptic wasteland. And then Emmett's the only one who's just like, yo, everybody okay? Got coffee? No, whatever that scenario is going to be. But oh, I like that part. It was pretty funny. I didn't I didn't think they're gonna use that song again and remix it though. But what? That's on them.
yeah. It just brings it back, which I don't know. I mean, the one thing that I will say I'm glad about for this movie is that it doesn't feel like it's repeating the first movie all that much. Like there is of course callbacks to it. But the problem with a lot of sequels, especially really bad ones, is that they're often just like, okay, let's do it all again. There's no real growth or progress. That's certainly here this time, which is both a positive and I do think kind of a detriment to the movie because it's like, okay, since the first movie was about um basically looking at older people, specifically like fathers, um, and how they look at toys versus a kid. Um, it meant like, okay, we can't really do that again.
Mhm.
Uh, so now we're actually going to be turning our criticism inward and basically acknowledge like, hey, you, the person that we were focusing on in the last movie, uh, you're not off the hook. You're kind of shitty too sometimes in the case that, you know, you know, and this is the thing even in the last movie where the movie ends with like the whole joke of like, oh, like the sister's coming in to play with the main character or the kid who's, creating this world.
Yeah.
So now we're like, okay, the fact that he was like all hesitant to play with the sister kind of tells us like, yeah, this is something we should address. Let's actually talk about how you acknowledge your playtime with someone else, which I think is a great idea for it to go on about. But I do kind of understand where some people would be turned off by essentially being told, "Hey, you can be shitty too."
Yeah. That kind of scenario, it's like, okay, first movie, understandable. Generational like divide as to how like people say. Because in Lego there are adult fans, and then you got the of course the children. And adult fans, they freaking go all out, like customizing their stuff, making these like massive dioramas or like creations. I mean, I went to that Lego con over by Pasadena
Right.
about a month back, and I see just these massively created sculptures made out of Lego, and it's mainly done by adults.
Hmm.
And like most adults are just like supervising it and stuff. And in some cases, like they're the ones like present like what would you call it? What would you call it? They have like all these parts that came from sets like from prior to that. Like so they have like an extensive history with the toy as well. So and it's kind of like and then when you have like a kid trying to like join in and play with that, from that perspective of the movie, I get it. It's like a father and son trying to connect through Lego in that sense, and their presentations are different. But in this one, like, yeah,
Yeah, the
it is a strange scenario when like you get put into that to that point. Like, hey, wait a minute, you're like, you may be blaming the adults like way of being playtime not really as good, but you need to be able to see that in a different light too because you're one to talk.
yeah, and I think I don't know how you feel about this, but I definitely thought like part of the reason why it's a little more distracting here with that angle is that I mean, well, okay, look, both movies are commercials for the Lego toys.
Yeah,
There's no
they're oh,
way
of course.
there's no way you're gonna walk out of either of these movies without thinking, I want to buy some Legos. Um,
Lord
but
knows.
whereas whereas the first movie at least felt a little more sincere about it and felt like, okay, this is a scenario where I can fully buy that this is, a parent who has a bunch of Lego collections and the kid just has access to all this stuff. With this one, it kind of felt like, no, we're literally pushing the fact that it's a commercial to your face because and again, I get that the father already had like a lot of Lego sets, but it's the fact that even like the younger sister has like all these Lego and Friends
Hmm.
um
It really
collections
did.
Duplo to a point that I'm like, okay, so they're not just, like, okay, maybe, you know, if they ever made another one, they would have revealed that Will Ferrell works at like the Lego factory or some shit. Because at a certain point, it's like, how many of these things do you get? Like again, like
Yeah.
I kind of got it in the first movie because it's like he's a collector of these things, but the fact that the daughter has all these toys, so ones that specifically would be like more or less like I would assume, anyways, out of his personal interest, just because it's like the girl specific brand, and it's like a bunch of these special Duplos that are like on franchise. I don't know. I just kind of feel like it's more like, yeah, this is the ad, like where it's like you don't even question the fact that this family suddenly has all these Lego merch.
Yeah, like the only one who realistically doesn't like these Legos at all is the mom.
Yeah,
It's the mom of all things. Like literally her whole like thing with the mom is named after Armageddon of all things. Like
yeah,
what the fuck?
our
Like
Mamageddon.
everyone likes Legos. Yeah, Armageddon. Like are you kidding me? And there's a lot of like that really like breaking the fourth wall meta humor that just kicks into that too. There's a lot of different like breaking the fourth wall moments in there. And even like
Yeah,
talking about stuff like outside of what is normally within the studio's purpose. So they make fun of themselves too. Just like they feel like in the other movie, of course. But my gosh, it does look and feel more like why are you advertising me all these different types of Legos? Like the Duplo, the Friends,
yeah,
there's just I just wanted to stick with just the one particular Lego that I know,
yeah,
but they pushed that onto us, so we'd have to say, "Oh no, there's a more expanded universe." You want to know what would be a more nicer, cooler, expanded universe? Bring back Bionicle.
yeah. I've heard a lot
Bring
of
back
people.
Bionicle.
I've heard a lot of
Gosh,
people say that like they should do Bionicle. I don't know, maybe Universal will do it, but
jeez.
yeah,
Yes,
like
Universal, please do. You have the damn reins. You have the plastic reins to make Bionicle happen.
speaking of the fourth wall breaking, that's one of the things that I'm like, okay, it is kind of funny, but it is kind of bothersome to me because even the first one had this stuff,
Yeah.
but I feel like this one goes so far into it that it almost is like it's almost acknowledging that this is a story that's just made up versus the
Mhm.
other one where like yeah, you eventually find out that there's a real world, the kids playing on this stuff, but it still felt like it was telling like a straightforward story, which I do think that's kind of one of the issues with this is like now that you already know that this is all the story of a little kid, as he's playing, it's like how do we go back to it while still feeling like it has stakes? And it's like, okay, well, in the last one, it kind of hinted that Emmett was coming to life in the real world, so we kind of kept that in. So it's like at times you can't really tell when it's just the kid's imagination and when it's supposed to signify that this is their own reality. And I mean, granted, look, we're adults watching this, but I feel like if you're a younger person watching this, because of course these are still targeted for kids, you'd probably be confused as to why there's this much of a confusing angle to how this reality works. Like,
Yeah, I want to interject here because
yeah,
the first movie, there was a mystique around that real world scenario. I mean, there was the like you already have like the tunnel thing that goes on that like the kid already it puts as part of it. Like we don't get to see that until like probably later on. Like sure, we get like images of like okay, like this kid is like playing around with these Legos and whatnot, but there's a mystique to it. Like that real world scenario, it wasn't really shown like completely until like at the climax of that movie. Like that was like it became that big of an important role in that. Whereas the second movie, it's really just going all over between that, and it's switching it back and forth without no pace. There's no
yeah,
pacing when it comes to that, and that really just throws off any viewer who is trying to enjoy the actual plot thoroughly. And it's like, what the heck? You want to get launched off over here, and it turns out it's going back to reality, and then like you get thrown over to like this bin and then again goes back to this Lego world, and it's like what the heck is going on? It's kind of it's really hard to follow up because it's like a twister,
yeah.
honestly. You can't tell like where's the end of that because it
Like,
keeps going back and forth.
yeah, and I feel like I do kind of admire what they were trying to do. Like it feels like they were trying to make a much more deeper and more existential story. But again, since they do have to focus on having a kid audience, I feel like they kind of dumbed it down a bit so that they could kind of understand, which that's a war of like, okay, we're trying to do something that's smarter, but also, easy enough for a kid to grasp, results in something where it's like, I don't think either side fully ever gels right. It
Mhm.
kind of reminded me of the Pixar movie Lightyear, which I know is another movie that got trashed a lot, but in a much worse level than this. And anyways, where it's like, if you've ever seen Lightyear, um, I remember someone described it as Interstellar for kids, and it kind of feels that way because you got a lot of like time travel and stuff like that in there. Which, funny enough, this movie's got time travel in it. I appreciate that you're trying to bring in some smarter ideas, but the fact that you're still trying to cater to kids means that you can't delve into it enough to where it fully makes sense. And as a result, you're losing in both ways. Just to be upfront, we're going to be discussing spoilers, but the big twist in this movie, which funny enough, like Lightyear, is that the villain of the movie is a future version of the main character, who's become twisted. Um,
Wow.
y- Wait, have you ever seen Lightyear?
No.
Oh,
No,
okay.
I
So I
honestly
just
haven't seen it, but I never wanted to see because of all the like, okay, when you work at a retail store for long enough, you kind of get tired of having to like deal with all the stuff that you're trying to promote for the movie. I get it. And they already spoiled a lot of stuff with all the things that I had to go ahead and put up on the shelves for that
yeah.
movie in particular. So, like, that pretty much disgusted me away from watching that movie, but I never thought that they would follow the same premise as Lego Movie 2.
Yeah,
That was
essentially,
just surprising. Like, what? Are you for real? Are you?
yeah. Yeah, like, so in Lightyear, the whole thing is that, they of course play around with the fact that, like, if you remember Toy Story 2, it was like Zurg is, Buzz's father. They don't do that in Lightyear. Instead, in Lightyear, it's like, "Oh, yeah, this is a future version of Buzz who essentially has become so obsessed with fixing his past mistake that he's, already old and everything, and he basically decided to go back in time to meet up with his younger self to basically kind of like fix the whole mistake. Basically like two buzzes are better than one. So there is kind of a similarity there. I think Lego Movie 2 does it a little better, especially because I'll say this much. I think Chris Pratt gets a lot of hate when it comes to voice acting because I think
He's
like
been in a lot of animated movies, you know that, right?
yeah,
Like really top tier level ones. Like both the Lego movie, the Super Mario Bros. What else? What else has he been
I
on
mean
that he's
he
not
recently
voiced?
he recently was in Garfield. I
There you
didn't even
go. Like what the fuck?
I didn't even know
Like come
until
on.
I didn't even know until recently that he was actually I'm forgetting what character, but he was actually one of the supporting characters in Ben 10. I mean, I was never really a fan of Ben 10, but he was apparently like in like when they're teenagers or something like that, when they're like older.
Oh, okay, from that version of Ben 10. Alright.
So I'm like, okay, I didn't know that, but point being is like, okay, I think he's actually really good at voice acting. I don't know if they really allowed to show that range sometimes, but I think this is a perfect example of it because, ignoring the whole time travel and whatnot, I do like that you have like him as Emmett, and it's like this very optimistic one, and then you have him as Rex, who's like the more broy, kind of like a satirization of like his action roles because it's like they make jokes about the fact that he's like in Jurassic World, Guardians of the Galaxy, and all that stuff.
Yeah. That's his spoof version of himself and, like, and how he presents himself in the other movies and whatnot, and it's, like, supposed to be, like, this, like, sporadic hero or whatnot. Like,
Yeah,
really just straight up, "Dude, bro, I'm going to kick ass, take names, and then be the hero as usual," while still doing some farming, or apparently in that's in one of the scenarios when he's talking about himself. But anyway, yeah, that is, his vocal range, I have no problem with whatsoever. It's pretty cool and convincing when
yeah,
watching him act up on this part of the movie, or this movie in general. It was very convincing, so I have no problems with that.
yeah. Like to me, it's just like I mean, I wouldn't say that I ever really forgot that he was voicing both characters, but when it comes up in the movie where it's like, "Yeah, I'm your future self. Didn't you notice we talk alike?" At that moment, I was kind of like, "Oh, okay, so that's why you were doing this. It's not just a joke on that." So I thought that was kind of clever, and it like again, I do feel like them bouncing off of each other. It does feel like two different characters, even if it's the same guy, obviously.
Yeah.
So I like that stuff. I don't know. Like I'll say this much: the stuff I like about this movie that makes me think like, okay, it's a good enough sequel is like one, the performances are still spot on. The jokes, even though it's more miss, I do think there are quite a lot of hits in it.
Mhm.
Um, Even though it kind of makes it a little confusing, I do appreciate the idea of like, okay, let's try to go from both the sister and brothers perspectives on how playtime works. I like the fact that it's trying to, even though it kind of fails in a way, but like it tries to critique, like the brother in terms of like, okay, this is how you approach playtime. I mean, I gotta admire the balls on trying to call out your main audience by saying, hey, you can be shitty too. The musical numbers, even though they're not that great, I do kind of
I am not a fan. Not
I
great is an understatement. Like, I wasn't expecting. Okay, so the first movie wasn't a musical at all.
no.
Is that what I recall? Yeah, there were absolutely like there was only like two musical pieces, but they weren't actually being sung by the actors. Like this movie was straight up a musical,
Yeah.
and it's like I'm not a big fan of it. I really wasn't a big fan of the presentation of it being musical, especially when you get to introduce what is considerably the bad one, Queen Whatever I Wanna Be. And that whole musical number, it's like I get it. I think that's just mainly for the kids, but
So
nah, I didn't needed it. Didn't really need that though.
here's my argument, and maybe this is because granted it's been months, but I still have that piece of shit movie on my mind.
Which
Uh,
one?
Wish, the Disney
Ah,
100th anniversary. Have you seen it?
no, but I just only see the mascot right behind you on that one, but I've
Yeah.
never watched the movie. I heard it
Okay.
was one of the worst 3D movies that the rodent had made.
I consider it to be the worst animated movie they've ever made. The fucking worst. Like even the star I don't really like, but I do find it adorable enough that I was like, okay, look, I'm gonna buy this little fucker. You can't see it, and I don't want to pull it out, but because it was
Oh
a pop.
no.
Well, no. Here's the thing. It's a popcorn bucket. Inside though, I have Mario and Luigi figures right inside because I had a lot of people basically saying like, "Oh yeah, it looks like the Luma from Mario." So I was like, "Okay, then I'll put my Mario and Luigi figures." You can't see it because, of course, of
Yeah, the lighting. I can't really see it, but I can see it right there. I see it like loud and clear where that
that.
star is.
But yeah, so I think it's the worst animated movie Disney has ever done. Uh, it's funny that they pushed that as their 100th anniversary. I could trash it all day, but one of the biggest things that it did wrong was the musical numbers. And think about that whole like with the Queen, whatever I wanna be. Like when she has her song where she's talking about how not evil she is. That song instantly reminded me of the villain song in Wish, because the villain song in Wish it's titled "This Is the Thanks I Get." Chris Pratt, God, Chris Pratt, Chris Pine. It's another Chris.
Okay, yeah.
Uh, Chris Pine is trying so damn hard to make that sound good throughout the movie, but it's just this very upbeat. It's like, dude, this does not sound like a villain song at all. But I was like, it's a similar vibe in terms of like, okay, the Not Evil song from Lego Movie 2 is like, okay, uh, I'm gonna give you all these gifts, and I would never do an evil thing. And then this is the thanks I get. The song from Wish is basically the king character saying like, oh yeah, I have the power to give people what they want, but they're not grateful for it. I could be evil, but I'm not because I give you these things. So it's like it's two basically songs of a similar style. Only real difference is that, and this is where I appreciate it and the Lego movie where it's like, okay, at least this is a joke, and it's part of not really that much of a big twist, but it's part of the whole reveal. Like, yeah, she's not really evil. She's being honest. She's just shit at explaining that
Yeah.
versus this guy who's like, oh yeah, he's trying to convince himself that he's not evil, but he is evil. But the song just sounds like this upbeat pop song that you would hear on the radio. And I don't know. I'll tell you this much. Whatever you think about how bad these songs are in this movie, they're way worse than Wish.
I have to give that a look, see. Then
It's been
again,
to a
like,
point that since
mm,
I saw that movie back in November, and this shows how much I love Disney. I
mhm.
was even willing to give it another shot when it came out on Disney Plus, just because I had some people who try to defend it, being like, "Oh no, if you're a fan of Disney, you'll appreciate it." And I'm like, "No, fuck you. It's a piece of shit. Don't tell me what I think, what I think." Um, but yeah, like I still have that on the mind every now and then, just because of like, man, everything it does wrong, it does so fucking wrong.
You think it wouldn't debase itself anymore, and then it convinces you, like, oh god, it did.
So, going back to the Lego movie, like the musical numbers, I'm like, again, I'm just thinking this is what competent animation, musical numbers are like. Like, granted, it's not the greatest. I'm not gonna
Mhm.
gonna 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 say that, but whether it's the Not Evil song, I'm like, okay, I understand its purpose. There's some kind of funny stuff in there, but it's not a very great song. The animations at least need to look at. I will say that because I do love seeing how the queen constantly changes her shape.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a neat thing for this one. Is like, okay, let's have a Lego character who's just a bunch of random pieces.
Yeah, that was a very good experiment that really pulled through for them in production. I really give them, like, hands on because dang, I really got that creativity going for it. Just as cool as like when they first tried to do like water, that big water sequence over in Lego Movie, the first one,
Yeah,
just that gigantic waves and all that stuff. That is hard to render on 3D CG. That is just crazy.
yeah,
So kudos for them for doing that because that made like a whole. It really brought in the character, like pun intended. It really brought the character of that villain. Well, not villain, but just the supporting role, I guess.
yeah. And then you of course have this song is gonna get stuck inside your head or whatever. Um,
Really did honestly at
it's an
times.
annoying song, but at the same time, I love the whole setup to it, where it's like you got the brainwashed people that Emmett
Yeah.
and Rex are dealing with, and then you got Lucy trying to escape from all this, eventually encountering Bruce Willis, which I always have to remind myself that that actually is Bruce Willis and not some sound alike. Um,
Wait, that was actually
that's actually Bruce Willis.
no. Hang
At
on.
least that's what it says
Hang.
on. At least that's what it says on Wikipedia.
Let
I
me
mean, of
look at his.
course,
Let me look at his IMDb. Let me see what the heck's going on
or you're gonna
here
have to stumble
because
through a bunch of straight to video movies.
hang on. Bruce Willis Lego Movie. Oh crap, he was in it. That was actually him. I thought that was just a joke. Oh my god.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
thought that was just a joke. I didn't think that was actually gonna be him. That's quite the cameo.
Um, so you got that. You also got, and I think this is the song that is kind of the weakest, just because it's the one where it's like, okay, there are some funny jokes in here. There's a lot of meta-ness into it, but it's the one that really doesn't need to happen. Um, Beyond just, I guess, the Lego Batman movie was popular enough, and then of course him appearing in the first movie, they gave him a whole song where the queen is trying to woo him or trying to
Mhm.
convince him to get married.
That
And
duet. That
yeah,
duet between the two.
and it does have some funny jokes in there because it's like it gets meta. It acknowledges that he's been Michael Keaton, Christian Bell, and all that stuff. But it's like, yeah, this one's just here to be meta. Um,
Mhm.
and also it just feels like, and this is a minor issue with the movie, is that, and I noticed on rewatch, is like there's a lot of Batman in this. Like not to a point that I hate Lego Batman, but it feels like, okay. Whereas the first one, it's like he was just a supporting character who
Yeah.
was just along for the ride, and yeah, he
Yep.
was a big part of it. But you could have told the story, and replaced them with anyone else, and it wouldn't have made a difference.
Yeah.
And of course, because he had his own movie, they're like, okay, this character was like the breakout character of that. So let's have him be more involved with the plot by having a big part of it be like, oh yeah, he's gonna get married. Um, Even though it kind of is like, I mean, yeah, he's there for that, but he's, I don't know, it kind of feels like you're turning him into like a MacGuffin or something, where it's like he's not really much of a character, or much more like just a joke spouting machine,
Uh-huh.
but the story needs him because that's what's gonna get Armageddon going.
Which is a weird thing because why would they need him particular? I get
Yeah.
that the success of the Lego Batman movie was the reason why they had him more prominent in the Lego movie too, but why him? It's just like this like I just don't really like
I mean,
follow through. Like I know he's like the joke Batman and that whole scenario where him and Queen whatever I want to be is just going at it with his history and whatnot. Um I just never really clicked into that situation as to why it would have to be him of all things. I would thought like if any other characters that are worth shining in that movie it would have been nice to see like maybe Benny do a little bit more. I feel like if we got to expand a bit more on that, like I get it, like the Queen wants to give them something to be happy about and all that with Ironbeard, Unikitty trying to be given their own like little slice of land, so to speak, so that everyone is happy. But like Benny was there since the beginning of the movie. And so like I feel like they would have maybe do a bit more with his character, maybe just slightly and like put still be capable of having Batman as a supporting role, just like in the first movie. But no, they put him on like mostly focus.
thinking about it, I'll say this much: the whole wedding thing was just kind of weird, anyways, because it's like, okay, so you're trying to unite the two worlds, fine, and you do take a bunch of characters because you're like, okay, these are essentially the leaders, except not Ahmed, which I'll get into that in a bit, but like they're like, oh, these are the leaders, which is really just the main cast of the first movie. We'll get married with Batman, and that'll unite the two worlds. I'm just like, okay, but if you're just trying to get married with one of them, why would you care about bringing the other ones, especially when they're constantly like, oh yeah, Wild Style is you know kind of like the wild card here, where it's like she's probably gonna mess things up. But more importantly, it's like going back to like when they're talking about like the leaders, they do first mention Emmett, and I do think that this was them trying to make a statement about the first movie, but it's like it kind of fails because it's like, okay, so Emmett was, at least going by how they describe it in this movie, is like he pretty much just inspired the people to rise up, but he didn't really do anything to stop the plan in the first movie. And I'm like, no, he came back, built his giant Mac, destroyed a bunch of the glue robots, whatever they were called, the Craggle robots, whatever.
Yep.
And eventually was one that confronted Lord Business and convinced them to stop doing what he was doing.
Yeah.
So it just feels like okay, you're weirdly insulting your main character, and not in a way where it's like it's kind of interesting, like at the very least with them saying like, okay, you got to look at the way you do your playtime, and especially with your siblings. It's not anything interesting like that. It's just, oh yeah, well, Emmett was like the lousy boy, and Wild Style's the one that did all the hard work. Which I'm like, I mean, I'm not gonna,
That throws a lot of shade to a character who really did a lot in the first movie, so to speak.
yeah,
Like,
like
my
that.
gosh.
It really does feel like okay. Um, Granted, I know that people consider this, probably farther back, but um, years old. How do we do feminist girl boss movies? Which I got no problem with doing female led stuff and whatnot, but
Mhm.
where it's like instead of respecting the characters, they're like, okay, we're gonna say that like the male character is a complete idiot, even though he had his value, just to put the female character in a pedestal. Even though again, it's like, well, you could have had them be on equal levels. You didn't need to have them be on like a separate thing to make your point,
Yeah.
come across. So it's just this weird thing, and because I'm thinking like, was there a point maybe where these guys originally wanted Emmett to be the one that gets taken in by the sister, and he's the one that would have been the one trying to get married with the queen, especially considering that the whole thing, as it's revealed, is like, oh yeah, Emmett was the one who you know, gave her pretty much it was like the original Lego, like that
Yeah.
Emmett made the heart and provided it.
Mhm.
So it's like, and again, with that acknowledged, I'm like, wait a second, then why are you shitting on Emmett if you know that he's the one that essentially started it?
Yeah.
I don't
It's
know.
like it really just throw it at the person. Like, he's the one who originally started it, and he was the one that created the queen at the end, only just to be like, "Oh, wait, he's also the one that can destroy it too." So what are you trying to say here? Are you saying that, like, um that the person, the one who's like, that is supposed to be, I would say, like, the older brother, I guess that's what they're going for here, that they're responsible of like maintaining that type of relationship to be either like to be good playtime or just not good at all in terms
Yeah,
of like playing with like what the sister. It's like, what the heck? The freaking little kid 5 years ago was the one that made the heart, and he wanted to start it off like dicey peacefully, and it's
yeah.
like, okay. And then for some reason 5 years later, 5 years of discontent playing Lego back and forth, I guess that's what happened. I don't know. That kind of scenario is okay.
Which speaking of that, I'm like, it kind of goes back to what I was saying, where I'm like, in the first movie, since it was just like we could assume it was just one afternoon, that the whole movie takes place in. Like it's just one afternoon of the kid playing this whole storyline. It just feels like something that would probably naturally happen with like an adult Lego collector, where it's like he, you know, leaves his toys behind and the kid decides to get on it. With this, since it establishes that it goes by 5 years, which I understand, it's a movie that was made 5 years after the fact. It does kind of lean into that whole like, is this a Lego commercial even more? Because it's like, okay, you're telling me that this kid doesn't have like a PlayStation or something like
Yeah, he could have done
they
anything else. He could have done anything else within that time frame. The kid was like what? He was like about 5. He looked like he was like 6 or 7 years old in the first movie. And if you like looking at it now, he looks like he could already just be, oh, I don't know, doing extracurricular activities around his school or freaking playing around on his PC or his console of any kind. It's just, wait a minute, something's not right. I
yeah,
don't
like
know.
that was one of the things that I think the other Lego movies did right in hindsight now, where it's like the Lego Batman movie, we don't bother going into the real world because it's like, yeah, we know that this is a thing, and even more so because they do reference the first movie because you do see like a little nod to like the shot of like Lord Business's like tower when when
Yeah,
Emmett is thrown off, you get a little glimpse into that. Um
but it's mainly focused on that world, particularly for the Lego Batman stuff. It was
and
mainly on that.
and then with the Lego Ninjago movie, even though there is a segment of it in the real world, it's a different kid. With that one, it's pretty much like just like, okay, here's a kid walking into the shop that Jackie Chan owns. Jackie Chan basically presents him like an old rusted Lego figure and pretty much just tells the story of like, oh yeah, this is how this came to be. So it's kind of like, okay, so I can buy this whole thing, but with this one, it's literally like, okay, since we're of course, focusing back on the same kid and whatnot, it's just like, so these people's lives revolve around Lego.
The whole
Uh,
family is majority like just been put around Lego, except for the mom, of course.
and it's just
But
kind of weird. Like I don't know if they were to do it again, like if they were to do another one, would they reveal that Will Ferrell is actually like a Lego businessman? Like he's like an exec for the Lego business. Or are we gonna get like a kind of crossover to Barbie where it turns out that he's like an executive for like the toy companies?
you know what would be a cool setup for a sequel for this? I already have a good idea here. What if like the dad was he used to work at Lego, but he's like about to be, I don't know, I would say laid off in a sense. So he looks at his Lego collection and whatnot, and he has all of these sets from over the years that his kids are playing. So, with like no with not much money like to spare and all that stuff and to secure his family's sake, they're going to have to try and figure out a way to get the money before his dad starts selling those particular collections away. That would be a really like
Or
crazy thing because like,
really
oh god,
emotional?
what the heck we're going to do? Like
Yeah,
cuz now the whole fate of their whole universe is going to be put at the brink because they're not gonna have a universe anymore to play with because all these Lego sets that the parents might have been buying for them, this could be like, oh, they can get some of their money back, or they can donate that, or like, it could be like a really spatial problem here,
yeah,
and I can
because
have multiple roles into like trying to solve it.
I'll say this much before they actually announced what this movie was going to be about. Before it got closer, like when the first movie came out, it was a hit, and obviously they already
Mhm.
greenlit a sequel because they're like, "Oh yeah, this movie's a hit. We're definitely going to do more." I do remember thinking like, okay, I think you could follow the Toy Story route where it's like, you have the second one being like the kids slightly older, and the toys start realizing their mortality, and then you have like the third movie where it's like the really sad one where it's like, okay, the toys are gonna be left behind by the adult. I don't know if I really want that kind of thing anymore, especially because with the second one, I'm like, okay, so it definitely went I guess like in a grittier route, but I do think like again the big downside is that whereas like with something like Toy Story, it's like since it's a bunch of random toys, it never feels like a commercial for one specific toy. Like it never feels like here's the Mr. Potato Head movie or some shit like that. Whereas with this one, it's like since it's all Legos, it's like okay, look, even if you're fully obsessed with Legos, you're bound to have done some other shit in your life. Like there's got to be some other toys that you had. Maybe that could be a thing that they do if they ever do a third one. If I basically have like, oh look, here's some like Transformers getting into the mix, or some GI Joe Barbie dolls, like basically like the Lego world is invaded by these other toy brands. I don't know if they'd ever be willing to do that kind of thing, but I think it would be kind of an interesting idea.
To be part of the brick community, like having like different brands doing it, let's say like because you already have that kind of crossover going on with the Friends and the Duplo and the regular Lego put together, but then like trying to mix in something like let's say Mega Blocks.
Yeah,
there is It is funny because there is like heated like arguments between the Lego and Mega Bloks community, and they go at it like back and forth. It's like even in some cases I've seen like YouTube videos where like kids look at between the Lego and like a Mega Bloks and look at Mega Bloks, eh, and then just like throw it away. But they do their work. They
Yeah,
freaking put in the work necessary. They're just as good as any constructive toy.
yeah.
But
So
to see that, and that would be, I would say that would be a pretty good game changer, because like, oh, now you're not just acknowledging the Lego community, you're acknowledging the brick like community as a whole. If you could see it for that light, maybe you could actually build a good premise for that.
yeah, but of course that would also result in these companies having to work together, which is not always the easiest thing. Um,
It's
I
never the
mean,
easiest.
I mean,
It's the hardest thing to pull. Like, even
uh,
in movies, in video games, having two rival companies working together could be really hard to pull.
yeah. So who knows if they're ever going that route? I think it might be an interesting way. What I will say is that there's apparently some plans for a third one, but I don't know whether or not Universal is actually going to pull that trigger or if they're going to do something else. Because or from what I was reading um, when I was looking up, like, okay, does Universal have anything planned beyond the Pharrell movie that they're doing? They mentioned like, oh yeah, we're thinking about doing a follow up to the Lego movie, like the specific Lego movies. But there's no mention of whether or not it's going to be an actual continuation of these movies, or if it's just going to be like the Lego Movie 3, but it's a whole different setup with different Lego characters. It just mentions like they're doing something, and then again, that's assuming that the Pharrell movie becomes enough of a hit that they're willing to consider it. But
Mhm.
that's something. I know that because this movie flopped, it did result in the cancellation of one media movie that they were making, which was called the Billion Brick Race. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but there
I've
was
only heard about it like a few times after like how they released the Lego movie 2 and then the Lego Ninjago movie. I only heard bits of it. Then I heard like the project was basically on the shelf at that point because of how those previous two just did not perform well.
yeah, basically it was supposed to be as the movie, the title suggests, a race movie. Think of it like wacky races but with Legos. Apparently they had Jorge Gutierrez. I don't know if he was directing it or if he was just involved to some capacity, but he's the guy who made the Book of Life, El Tigre,
Yeah.
bunch of good Hispanic stuff. So that kind of sucks that we never got to see
Yeah,
what
that
they
would have
could
been
have
a
done.
completely different like that would be like a good completely different presentation to what the predecessors of the Lego movies have already done.
Yeah,
So, um
but
but we'll see where we go because that Pharrell movie, that biopic was surprising to say the least. I wasn't expecting a biopic that was going to be based on Lego. Like, are you for
which
real?
yeah, I mean, I don't know how it turns out. I hope it's a good movie. My general thing is like, is this gonna be a Lego movie where it's like it's only Lego because they just had the brand, or I I kind of hope maybe as the movie comes out, it's revealed that Pharrell was always a big Lego fan and he always wanted to do something with Legos. Maybe that'll make him more passionate. I mean, even if that's not the case, I mean, as long as it's good, I won't mind. But that is something that I kind of hope, just because it is kind of like I don't want them to just be like, okay, let's just attach the Lego brand to random stuff just because we can. Like I'd rather it
Yeah.
be because they have some kind of passion for it.
Exactly. Like, if I start seeing like on the first few scenes, like it's like a young version of Pharrell, he's just likes to play with Legos, and it's like each time that became a bit more of a thing with him over time. Like, okay, yeah, like just a bit like of like a childhood synopsis, whatnot. But then you bring it and just go ahead and use the whole Lego thing as part of his presentation. Okay, understand that. But if he's a big fan of Lego, like, okay, I'm down for it. I'd be willing to watch. It's just that if you're just going to place this as some sort of like, I wouldn't say like a product placement, but I feel like it is at this point because we don't know.
Right.
And if you're gonna place a celebrity like that and then use the creativity of Lego to represent their life in that way, then they better have some form of like relation to the toy itself. Like, what was the reason why they picked them specifically for this toy? And granted, I saw in the trailers like it was supposed to. It's more like a promotion of creativity and whatnot. And yeah, they do it both ends. Music and Legos kind of go hand in hand. They coincide with each other. But if it's just him being like a face on that, and then the Lego production doesn't have anything else to hold him besides his fame and all that, then I don't know. I'm kind of scared as to how this movie will go.
I mean, I guess what I can say for the Lego Movie 2, uh, like I said, I do think there are good aspects to the movie. I think this is a good enough sequel, as I'll put it, but it is hurt by a lot of stuff where it just feels more so than the first movie. Like this was definitely a commercial for it, which again, you're not gonna escape that because the fact that it's a Lego movie means that it was always a commercial. But it's like it nakedly feels that way instead of like, okay, we're doing a movie about Legos. We're just doing a movie to push Legos. Is I guess the big difference. And like I said, it just that it gets confusing at times. I do think the humor is kind of weaker in this one just because there's a lot of
They
fourth
really
wall.
just like delve into it way too much on the meta humor, if I'm
Yeah,
not being mistaken. Like having a guy like a good watcher like two on that, they really put themselves into the meta humor too much on that.
and
And
then
granted, yeah, that the messy scenario that happens at the climax of it all, it's like, oh man. I started losing track a bit when once the whole twist happens. And it's like, oh, it's a future Emmett that turns out was not uh being picked up or anything because apparently he was stuck in a dryer.
the
Like
dry R system,
the dryer system. Like, oh, he's on the dryer system. Like
which I'll say that's another thing that I kind of have an issue with this one.
uh,
Like in the first movie, the joke is kind of like, oh, okay, so obviously this kid is trying to create a bunch of fancy names for like the real world items. Like instead of crazy glue, it's Craggle.
yeah.
They make jokes about like, okay, here's like the um I forgot what they call the knife, but the exacto knife, the exact zero knife, or something like that.
Yeah.
Like
The
basically, like there's like that joke, but it mostly stays within the Will Ferrell character, Lord Business.
yeah.
Having all the characters do that is just like I don't know. It feels like okay, you just took this thing that was more of a character trait and dumped it on everyone, and it's like there's no real reason for it because it's just like in
Like
the
there's
first
no
movie,
established history. There's no established thing like going on with that except for that character Will Ferrell had. Like none of the other characters had a clue about now for some reason all the other characters in the Lego movie too have a clue about what the heck these real world items
items
are.
are, and
Like what? I
it's
thought
kind of
it's
like I don't know, like I feel like they partly did it to kind of try to throw off like maybe some viewers, like younger viewers, by being like, okay, if they say that they're gonna be dumped in the bin of storage instead of storage bin, it'll
it's
make it
really trying too hard.
it'll pretty much make it yeah, it'll pretty much make it so that they won't know right away, like, oh yeah, they're gonna be dumped in the storage bin, and I'm like, okay, if you wanted to make it mysterious, why not just say like, oh, they're gonna be dumped in the endless void or something like that, and then with
Yeah, like
the
make it give it some mystique. Don't just go ahead and say like, "Oh, we're gonna just mispronounce these real world items" instead of actually giving like some sort of mysterious and also like impending doom level of calling these particular places. Like seriously,
the
you could have just called freaking
it's
the under the dryer thing.
yeah, like because like with something like that, I'm like, why not just like if you really wanted to give it a name, like why not just be like, it's the dark under system or something like that, since you already have the space thing, like just give it like random names instead of um just having the characters say it in a funny way, which isn't really all that funny.
Or the you know what? Just the dryer. It's a freaking spinning machine. Just call it the infinite black hole. How about that? That would have
Yeah,
been much
exactly,
easier. Like, oh
exactly.
my gosh.
Especially because
It's
the whole idea is that Emmett was trapped there, and I do think that there was something interesting about the idea of like, okay, this is an Emmett that becomes evil because he was told years ago, like, oh yeah, you gotta man up or whatever, and as a result of him being stuck and seeing his friends um not even doing anything for him, not even trying to go back for him.
Yeah.
resulted in him being cruel. I'm like, that's an interesting idea, but I do think
Yeah.
you kind of botched it in the way you presented it, and that's the main thing I feel about this movie. It does have interesting ideas. I do think as a sequel, when you just say what it was going for, it does try to expand the world in a way that's interesting. The problem is in the presentation.
The
It's
execution of it all,
yeah,
it
like
was
the
very rough.
very rough because it's just like this constant tug of war where like, okay, we got the idea in place, but we got to dumb it down for kids, but at the same time, we don't want to uh go all in on it because it might be too confusing for them. And it's like you did this tug of war, and I don't know. It's something where um I kind of feel like if they had to go more adult with it, they probably should have. But I understand why they wouldn't because it's like this is still technically targeted for kids, and a lot of animated features rarely want to go for the older audience. But I don't know. It's something that like thinking about in terms of something recent,
Mhm.
that I appreciated about the second Spider-Verse movie is that they weren't afraid to just be like, okay, like this one's gonna be more mature, and the audiences that grew up with it are, we're gonna trust that they understand what's going on. This
Mhm.
feels like it's the opposite, where it's like we know that the audience has grown up, and we want to do this much more existential and deep and thoughtful story about this stuff. Now that one, that this is a world where it's in a kid's imagination,
Uh-huh.
um, but we're still trying to sell toys to kids, so we got
Yeah.
to make sure that little 3-year-old Timmy kind of gets it, but as a result, no one really understands what's going on.
Yeah. Like,
Like,
when you try to appeal to both, like, to your previous audience and then to, like, the new one just because, like, this product is selling, like, shelves worth, you're going to lose out on both ends. I'm
yeah,
just gonna tell it because it gets really confusing from that point on.
yeah, like if the first movie was a solid 5 stars. This one, I think, depending on my mood, is either a 3 or 3.5 star. Like it's still a movie I recommend, especially if you enjoyed the first one. But it is a movie where I'm like, just be aware that it's not going to be as good as the first one, and it definitely has its issues. I don't think it's bad. Like I've seen some people do the whole joke of like, oh yeah, the Lego movie never had a sequel just to because it's like the common joke that I see online where it's like if a movie sequel is so bad they kind of like ignore its existence. I don't like doing that, but even on that level, I'm like, I don't think it's that bad. I've seen a lot of worse animated sequels out there, but I do think it's definitely a noticeable step down from that first movie.
Yeah, it is a drop in quality, and like you said, definitely the first movie was just like fucking chef's kiss right there. But that movie, the second movie, after watching it like at least twice, ah man, it just doesn't age well if you look at it from this perspective now. Because yeah, all that meta humor and all that confusion that kicked in, it's like wow, the first movie really is better by comparison. So agreeing with you on that, I would say on my perspective, like the whole star rating on that, it's like 3. Just down the middle 3. Like it's 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 okay for a sequel. It's just
Yeah,
it could have been done more to, specify specifically what they're trying to go for because it just got lost in its own it got lost in its own plot afterwards. So
yeah,
it made it really hard for people to follow up to. So if they were to do this sequel, they really need to get a movie going that is going to keep them focused like the first movie did and not be as convoluted like the second movie did.
yeah. I think,
So,
yeah, like I think like what you were describing for a sequel, like maybe, you know, the toys are trying to keep themselves together as like the father loses the job, and like you know, I don't know, they get sold off or donated or whatever. That's
yeah, a
an interesting enough.
collectorship. A collectorship storyline where like there's someone that particular wants to buy out all of his stuff because he's in a bad rough time and they're trying to make sure that this collector does not doesn't get what he wants, so the Legos try to find a way and figure out how they can save themselves from being taken to this other world and
Yeah,
being stuck in cardboard boxes for the remainder of their natural existence.
yeah. I mean, for me, yeah, that's an interesting idea. Another thing that I would say is maybe just keep it to the two movies. I mean, even though again this one is a lot weaker, I do think like okay, some of the ideas in there complement the first one, even if not as well as they should complement it. To a point where I'm like, just maybe leave it at this. It's fine. You know, you already told everything that you needed to say in the first movie. This one you kind of added things that would have been worthwhile to explore, but um just wasn't executed perfectly. I don't know. I'm not exactly. I mean, of course, they probably are making another one, but I'm not exactly rushing towards seeing a third one.
Yeah, I'm not rushing towards seeing it unless they really convince me with that Pharrell biopic, because that's gonna make the difference so far. Like
Yeah,
once that comes out, because the trailer, they really did put a lot of effort onto that. They
yeah,
wanted to make sure, like, okay, this is how Pharrell sees his world. He wanted it to be done in Legos, and again, they're doing the meta humor again. It's like, wait, you want it to be done in Lego? Your movie? Like, it's literally in the trailer.
yeah.
So they're still doing the meta humor, but it looks like now they're trying to be more visually, like, like visually captivating and following up his whole story. So I was like,
Basically,
okay,
dialing it back on the meta store or meta humor, because
yeah,
meta humor can only take you so far, and once you start using it more as a crutch,
yeah.
where it's like nothing matters, it becomes this whole thing where it's like, yeah, it doesn't really work. Like, that I think the Deadpool movies kind of do it well enough where they never feel like okay, I'm not invested in the story. Like even like that was my big worry for like the recent one, Deadpool and Wolverine, where because they were doing like kind of like a send off to the Fox movies, I was kind of thinking like okay, you're gonna have the characters stop and talk about like like the Fox humor all the time, but no, there's actually a heart to it. There's actually
Yeah.
a whole thing of like okay, this is a movie about Deadpool just trying to save the people he loves.
Yeah.
Um,
There's a whole lot of love to that, and then in commentary to that movie, there's a whole lot of love to the studios that even made those movies from the get go. That
yeah,
whole thing is just a straight up love letter. I'm like, wow, that I have no like problems or arguments about. That movie was just an incredible thing to watch and something like very well thought of and nostalgically made. Even though they didn't get all the characters though. I know that there were some situations that get they were trying to get Nick Cage to reprise his role
as
as
Ghost
as
Rider.
Ghost Rider. There was Ryan Reynolds was really trying because like he was one of like what is it? The top 4 before like with like Fantastic Four and Blade and whatnot, with Elektra, Daredevil. They
Yeah,
wanted to get him on it too because like damn man, early 2000s. Shoot. Would have been
yeah,
so cool, but like Cage was like, "No, man. He's recently become a very serious actor in his movies lately." And I'm like, "Damn, I'm all for it, dude. I'll miss
yeah,
my I'll miss my face off level Nick Cage, but damn, man, appreciate I appreciate what he's been doing for himself in the movie industry now. Like, man, kudos to him."
yeah.
But
And
uh
then I don't know. So that is the thing where it's like keep the meta humor to a minimum. Don't make it the whole thing because again, this whole movie. Like every time a character sings, um, there's always at least one character that acknowledges like, oh, are we in a musical or something like that? And it's like, yes, we're in a musical. You already fucking knew this.
yeah,
There's
it's
no
like
reason for you to constantly mention it, and like I said, even though it is kind of funny, that song between, Batman and the Queen, is pretty much just a 2-minute song where it's like, "Okay, let's see how we can reference all of, the actors that had played Batman up to that point."
yeah, it was just like, oh, that's just too much. I get it. It's the history of Batman, and every single name you put on there, I get it. That's part of the joke. But
Yeah, like,
really,
there's better ways to do this, like, I don't know if you've, seen the recent, Batman cartoon that hit Amazon, Batman Caped Crusader.
oh no, that one that looks really epic looking
Yeah,
too.
I
I
think
never got a chance to see it.
it's from, like, not the full creative team, but it has some of the people that made the classic '90s animated series, Batman.
Oh,
Um,
okay, cool.
there's like one episode, without giving anything away, where There's some orphans involved with it, and it's like if you're a fan of Batman, you already get like the little references because it's like here's like the orphans, like here's little Dicky, here's little Jason, here's little Steffi Brown and
Dang,
Carrie.
okay.
And it's like, okay, so if you're a Batman fan, you already know that those are Robins from like
Yeah,
different
different
timelines.
timelines.
So
Shoot.
I'm like, okay, I see. I love when it's like something simple like that, where it's not too in your face, but if you know the stuff, you can go along with it. This movie definitely did it where it was at times it's like it's a little too in your face.
It's a little nauseating when they do it, especially. Goodness. But oh well, that's the Lego Movie 2 in a nutshell. It was a good movie that presented itself with a somewhat decent sequel kind of plot line. Just lost it at the end of it because there were too many things going on in the foreground.
Pretty much, it's definitely the way I would say it. It kind of like it wants to be a great sequel, and I do appreciate when it tries. Like it is something that definitely tries, but it fails in that execution. So it's not one that I can highly recommend like the original. It's not one where it's like, um, if you've never seen the first one, I would highly recommend you watch it. It's
Yeah.
at most one where I'm like, okay, if you're a fan of the original, watch it. You're gonna be a little disappointed, but I do think it has some good points in the end, so you'll probably enjoy it if you enjoyed the first one. I don't think it's as awful as some people say it is, but it's not great. And for that, like I said, it's depending on my mood, it's probably going to be a 3 or 3.5 star. I
Yeah.
honestly, when it comes to the whole star system, I don't really care too much about it, as noticed by the fact that I can't settle on one specific thing. But that's pretty much what I would sum it up as. But yeah, that's about as much as I can really say on that.
Yeah, and I am fully on agreement with you on this movie. Had it been done a little bit more differently and had been more linear in its focus, then maybe that would have been a really good like follow up to the movie. But, you know, when you try to juggle too much, eventually you're going to drop something.
Yeah,
That's the thing. That's the whole morale to this kind of story. If you want to watch this movie, just think of it in that perspective because if you like the first movie, which both of us definitely do, I hold that in high regard as well. Just watch it, but make sure you have an open mind as possible because it's gonna be pretty hard to follow. It's gonna be definitely hard to follow if you try to figure out where it's going from there.
like I said, it's just okay in terms of how it's executed. I don't know. One thing that I just thought of that might have fixed a lot of it is like at one point there's a whole joke about how Emmett thought that Rex was just in his head,
Oh yeah, when I saw like
but Lucy could see him, and I'm like, I, I don't
I
know
like
if it would
that
have.
joke.
That joke was funny. I'm not gonna
That
lie.
was pretty good. I like that
That
joke.
that was a pretty good joke because you kind of knew it, but at the same time, I just started thinking, what if maybe that's all it was, and maybe that might have made it a little easier to follow.
Yeah.
I don't know if it would have actually fixed it, but it might have made it like instead of having the whole time travel thing, it would have just been like, no, this is the tough Emmett that has been hiding there for like 5 years, trying to make his way out. And maybe like if you're gonna have that whole scene where they kind of shit on him at the start of the movie, maybe that's what slowly triggers it, and it's more or less just like this is him after years of getting shit from all these other characters as they've changed, as the world has become a greedy Mad Max thing. Maybe it's like slowly pent up, and he's grown more resentful, but he's still trying to play up that happy demeanor. That might have been something.
That would have been a pretty cool concept. It's like taking the plot from Fight Club.
Fight
Like if you take
Club,
yeah, it's like Fight Club all over again. It's like
or considering that you have Batman in there, it's kind of like one of his villains like Two Face, just without the Two Face thing, or
yeah,
how you could have even been like, hey, well, remember how the last movie had good cop, bad cop with like this changing face. maybe this is the kind of that like that scenario. I don't know. I just think that maybe that might have made it a little easier, but I don't even know for sure.
I mean, I think it'll be cool because, like, if you didn't make that second Emmett Rex, if you didn't make that character like a full fledged character and just have it be someone that was under Emmett's psyche the entire time and only shows up as like some sort of hallucination to make him become a tougher one, that would be understandable because that kid or that Emmett represents the kid's like whole like psyche of trying like to play with Legos, and you have those two there like conflicting ideologies like oh like I like I'm trying to be peaceful and trying to play with others, but at the same time it's like no man, I want to break everything because this is my world kind of
Yeah,
thing, you know what I mean? So to have it in that kind of plot, I think that would have made the whole movie a lot more easier to follow
yeah,
because like oh okay it's like because you already know like how we started this. It's like okay, this movie was basically telling us, because that kid is being us, like saying like oh you're not off the hook, you're just as bad in playtime as like any as like the dad in a sense. So how do you put that? You put that with those two different versions of him, because like with kids, like kids have a tendency to be stingy about the things that they play with. Let's be real here.
yeah,
They don't bother sharing stuff unless they're actually willing to do so. And even then, it go like they need like a lot of trust to do that. And so to have that character going, and like these kids were fighting each other back and forth playing Legos for 5 years. That's Rex is the perfect scenario for that. He's just like that kid's I don't know how messed up the kid is for it
yeah,
to like let it fester for like 5 years when it could have been just like resolved in a week or two realistically with parent intervention. Like no, you let this kid brood. You let this kid brood, getting this scenario where he creates this alter ego of himself in the ways of playing of having playtime with his sister. That's becomes the whole scenario. That becomes the whole plot line. I think that would have been so good. Like okay, but don't do it in 5 years. Do it in like I don't know. Don't do it in 5 years. I feels like that's too much.
I mean, the 5 year stuff you kind of know only exists because they wanted to keep the same kid actor. I mean, the only other solution would have been to just recast the actor, which I feel like they probably should have.
Yeah, they probably should have done that, honestly.
But you know, I don't know. It is what it is. This movie is already 5 years old now. We're as far away from the Lego Movie 2 as the Lego Movie 2 was as far away from the first Lego movie. So there's
Yeah.
nothing we can really do now. It's now in another studio's hands to do Lego movies. Whether or not they continue this specific world or do another thing that just happens to be about Legos, we'll see after their for a movie.
Yeah, we'll
Um,
see. We'll see when that movie really does go piece by piece on trying to make the Lego universe according to Universal. Yeah. Yeah, but wah.
uh,
Anyway.
well,
But yeah.
I feel like that's definitely about as much as I can say this time for sure.
Mhm.
That was just thought that came to mind, but um, I don't know. Like I said, that's about as much as I could say. Fine
Uh,
movie, has its problems. That's as much as I can say.
it's like a sponge with a rough side. But the rough side only shows up at the end, so like
Yeah.
but yeah, that's pretty much what that is. That movie is in a nutshell. But yeah,
So
I'll that's all I can say about it too.
so I'm sure if for all of you watching, you probably question what's all this stuff. I'll be selling soon some custom Pokemon card packs. So if you're into Pokemon cards, go ahead and grab that stuff. I'll be
Nice.
selling them at $6 a pack. That's pretty much all I'm really advertising. I don't know if you got anything to sell on at the moment.
Oh man. Wait, what is that? I don't have anything to sell. What do you mean? What?
Well, like
What's going on?
advertise, like not necessarily sell, but
Oh, okay. In terms of advertising, since you already know what I've been I am capable of, since I'm the Lego animator who's showing up here on this podcast. Let me tell you something, it's been way too long. I haven't been on it for quite some time, but since now I will be getting back into it, it's going to be rough. But I am going to continue on and working on the Lego animation since I have been under hiatus as well. It's not just him, it was also as me. And there's been a lot that's been going on in my mind and trying to get that together. So if any of my viewers and subscribers from my 3 Fight channel are watching this, let it be assured, I'm still alive. You could already see me thus far. And two, I am going to go back to working on these Lego videos again because one, it's been a very long time and I've been very dedicated in other ventures as I've seen fit. And I think this is about the right time to come back. It's definitely the right time to come back because my story on Lego Weapon Store Stories, that season one, needs to end. It definitely needs to end. And I have all like the voice actors already been put onto it for the 11th episode. And I've seen the comments as well. If this is ever going to be put on like YouTube, right? This will be put on
This will be
YouTube
put
and
on
whatnot.
YouTube.
Okay, so once you see this, I'm just letting you know that I am going to get back into working on it because again, I had done so much like outside of my realm of like YouTube and animation and stuff that it was hard for me to get back into this. So let it be known, I'm still working on it and hopefully and definitely I don't wanna promise it, but I wanna make sure I can get this done. I am hopeful that I can get this episode out before the year ends. That's for sure on that part. But other
All
than
right.
that, and as far as that goes on, we'll see what happens in the next animations after to come for 3 Fi Studios or Flip Fine. That's what I would say to see the least. But yeah, that's the only thing I can advertise. And hopefully, if you guys are still watching some of the animations I've did, again, it's always great to leave a comment, like, and also to my friend Octaviano, like leave a comment, like and subscribe to his content because we're definitely two creators that are wanting to share our passions in the world of entertainment as well as what we do and delve into such. All right.
So I just want to say that if you do add anything to those episodes that you're working on,
Mm-hmm.
maybe try adding in the Lego George R. Martin as a little joke.
Lego George R. R. Martin, dude. Like, not
I,
gonna lie, I
every time,
actually,
you know, there's a lot of creators out there that are are making you wait for your works.
yeah. Jeez. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I know. It's like I don't want them to wait. That's the thing. But like I have I have unfortunately made the viewers wait because of my scenarios outside of what is the realm of
Yeah,
that. But other than that, that's like to get back into it again will be a wonderful feeling because I mean, I still have my Lego stuff right here and I have been putting over these past few years some upgrades. I mean, my goodness. If I can only show what's going on around here, even the table alone is an upgrade. So
mm,
I do have my camera though. The camera's still good though. So
nice.
so I'm still using this kind of camera now. We'll will not be upgrading anytime soon. Just that's a little dusty because I was actually using it yesterday. Um, but long story short, I am still gonna go back into working on these videos. It's just that it's been a while because of that. So it might be a little rough for me to get back into it, but hopefully you guys will understand. And I hope that you will be excited to see what I have in store for you guys when this video comes out.
All right. So with that all said, I just want to say thank you for all thank you for coming on. Uh, for anyone watching, thank you for watching. This has been Octaviano Macias, the host of I Can't Believe It's Not the Mouse, and we'll see you again next time.
All right. We'll see you again next time. Take it easy.
Thanks for stopping by. Go ahead and follow this channel. Subscribe, like and comment, ring the bell for notifications. Go ahead and also follow my podcast and give some love to my Patreon account while you're at it. It's www.patreon.com/saicams. Again, thanks for stopping by and I hope you come back for more in the future.